Frank Lively had been working the night shift at the Desert Sky Motel for almost 5 years. It wasn't much, just a 12-room roadside stop along Highway 87, the kind of place people only stayed when they had nowhere else to go. Most of the guests were truckers, drifters, or families whose cars had broken down. Frank liked the job because it was quiet. He didn't like talking much, and the solitude suited him just fine. But tonight, something felt off. The man in room 9 had checked in just after midnight. He paid in cash, avoided eye contact, and gave only the name John. That wasn't unusual. Frank had seen plenty of people who didn't want their real names on record, but it was the man's behavior afterward that made Frank's skin crawl. Every 20 minutes or so, the guy would step outside, scan the parking lot, then hurry back into his room. Once he left and came back in a different car. Frank knew because he had a habit of keeping mental notes on the cars outside, old habits from his days working security before this job. A beat-up Ford Taurus had brought the guy in, but now he was parking a black sedan in the same spot. Something wasn't right. Frank leaned forward on the counter, pretending to look at his crossword puzzle while keeping an eye on the security monitor. Room 9's door creaked open again. The man stepped out, looking left and right, then disappeared around the corner of the building. Frank exhaled. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe the guy was a drug dealer or cheating on his wife or just had a bad case of nerves. None of those things were his problem. His job was to rent rooms, not play detective. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. After another 10 minutes, Frank grabbed the master key and stepped outside. The air was cool, the neon sign above buzzing with a faint hum. The parking lot was empty except for the usual cars. A single moth banged itself against the light above the front office door. Frank hesitated outside room 9. He knocked. "Sir, you in there?" No answer. He knocked again, firmer this time. Motel policy says I gotta check on guests if they're acting suspicious. That wasn't actually a policy, but it sounded official enough. A shuffling noise came from inside. Then the door yanked open, and Frank found himself staring at a wiry man with sunken eyes, a patchy beard, and a nervous energy that practically screamed trouble. "What the hell do you want?" the man snapped. Frank held up his hands. "Just checking in. Had some concerns." "Concerns?" The guy let out a dry laugh. "How about you mind your own business?" Frank wasn't easily intimidated, but there was something unhinged in the man's gaze. He caught a glimpse inside the room. Clothes scattered on the floor, a duffel bag half zipped on the bed, something metallic poking out from inside it. A gun. Frank tensed. The man saw his eyes flick to the bag and stepped forward aggressively. "You got a problem, old man?" Frank felt his stomach tighten. This was the moment. He could back off, pretend he saw nothing, or he could push forward. His gut told him to push. "This is my motel," Frank said evenly, "and I don't like trouble." "Yeah," the man smirked. "Well, I don't like nosy clerks." The tension crackled between them. Then the man reached for the door to slam it shut. Frank moved fast. He wedged his boot against the threshold. "You hiding something?" The man snarled. "Get out of here before you regret it." At that moment, a door creaked open a few rooms down. A guest, an older woman from room 6, peered out, alarmed by the raised voices. "Everything okay?" she called. The man's eyes darted toward her, then back to Frank. His hand twitched at his side. Frank stood his ground. "Yeah," he said loudly, not taking his eyes off the guy. "Matter of fact, could you call the cops for me?" The man's face contorted with rage. "You son of a..." He shoved Frank backward, hard. Frank stumbled but kept his footing. The woman gasped and disappeared into her room. A second later, the distant sound of a phone being dialed reached Frank's ears. The man cursed under his breath, glanced toward the lot, then bolted, running toward the back exit of the motel. Frank didn't chase him. He didn't need to. 5 minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights of 2 patrol cars flooded the parking lot. Officers stormed the property, guns drawn. Frank pointed toward the back lot. He went that way. They found the guy hiding behind a dumpster, trying to pry open a storm drain. Turns out, his real name wasn't John. It was Travis Greeley, wanted in 3 states for armed robbery and assault. He had warrants out, a stolen car, and a gun in his bag that had been linked to a recent liquor store shooting 2 towns over. By morning, Frank's face was in the paper. Motel clerk stops wanted fugitive. The cop shook his hand. The owner of the Desert Sky gave him a free breakfast, which honestly wasn't much of a reward given how terrible the eggs were, and guests called him a hero. Frank didn't feel like a hero. He felt the same as always, tired, in need of a coffee, and more than ready for his shift to end. But as he sat behind the counter watching the sunrise through the dirty front windows, he had to admit something about the way the world felt today was just a little bit different. Thanks for tuning in to Fireside Stories. If you like this story and want more just like it, remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. And we'll catch you the next time that we all gather around the fire.